The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the city streets. Leaves swirled in small whirlwinds as an elderly black woman named Evelyn stepped out of the crisp autumn air and into the elegant ambiance of Harmonia, one of the most exclusive restaurants in town. She paused just inside the doorway, allowing her eyes to adjust to the dim lighting that bathed the room in golden hues. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above polished wooden tables, and soft jazz music floated through the air like a gentle breeze. Evelyn wasn't dressed extravagantly. She wore a simple navy blue coat with gold buttons, paired with sturdy black shoes. But there was something about her presence that commanded respect. Her silver hair was neatly styled under a velvet scarf, and her posture spoke of years of grace and resilience. She carried herself with quiet dignity, as though she belonged there despite knowing full well how places like this often made assumptions, based on appearances. She chose a corner table near the window, where the last remnants of daylight filtered through sheer curtains. From here she could watch the world outside while remaining slightly removed from it. As she settled into her seat, Evelyn placed her purse gently on the table and folded her hands together. It was clear she wasn't in a hurry. She seemed content, simply to observe the hum of activity around her. The restaurant buzzed with life. Waiters weaved between tables, balancing trays laden with steaming dishes. Patrons laughed softly, their conversations punctuated by the clink of fine china and the occasional pop of champagne corks. Yet for all its charm, Evelyn felt a faint but familiar unease settling in her chest. Over the years, she'd learned to read the subtle cues, the fleeting glances, the slight hesitations that signaled whether or not she would truly be welcomed in spaces like this. Her thoughts were interrupted when a young man approached her table. He was tall and lean, with neatly combed hair and a crisp uniform that marked him as part of the serving staff. His name tag read, Marcus. At first glance, he seemed polite enough, offering her a practiced smile as he handed her a leather-bound menu. But almost immediately, Evelyn noticed a shift in his demeanor. His smile faltered slightly, replaced by a look of discomfort that he tried, and failed, to mask. "Good evening," Marcus said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Can I help you?" His tone was polite, but there was an edge to it, a hesitation that betrayed his internal conflict. Evelyn met his gaze calmly, her expression giving nothing away. She didn't need to say anything, her silence spoke volumes. Marcus glanced briefly at her attire, then back at her face. For reasons he couldn't quite articulate, he found himself struggling to reconcile what he saw before him with the image of the restaurant's typical clientele. Without realizing it, his body language began to change. His shoulders stiffened, and his once warm smile became strained. He cleared his throat, awkwardly, unsure of how to proceed. For Evelyn, this moment was achingly familiar. She had lived long enough to recognize the signs, the unconscious biases, the unspoken judgments that people sometimes projected onto others without even meaning to. Still, she refused to let it dampen her spirit. Instead, she took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was here tonight, to celebrate a milestone, to savor a rare moment of indulgence, and perhaps to prove, to herself more than anyone else, that she deserved to occupy this space as much as anyone else. As Marcus lingered uncertainly beside her table, Evelyn finally broke the silence. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice steady and calm. "I'll take a few moments to look at the menu." Her words seemed to snap Marcus out of his daze. Nodding quickly, he retreated a step backward before turning away entirely. But as he walked toward the kitchen, his mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Something about Evelyn unsettled him, not because of who she was, but because of the questions she raised within him. Questions he wasn't ready to confront. Little did Marcus know this encounter would set off a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about fairness, humility, and the power of perspective. And little did Evelyn realize that her quiet act of defiance would resonate far beyond the walls of Harmonia, leaving an indelible mark on everyone involved, including her own son, whose name was proudly displayed on the plaque at the entrance of the very restaurant where they now stood. This sets up the foundation of the story, introducing both Evelyn's quiet strength and Marcus's inner turmoil, while hinting at larger revelations yet to come. As Evelyn sat quietly at her table, the restaurant continued to hum with activity around her. She opened the menu and began perusing its pages, though her mind was only half focused on the dishes listed there. Her attention kept drifting back to Marcus, the young waiter who had approached her moments earlier. There was something about his demeanor that lingered in her thoughts, a mix of discomfort and hesitation that she recognized all too well. Marcus, meanwhile, had retreated to the kitchen, his hands trembling slightly as he set down an empty tray. He leaned against the counter for a moment, trying to steady himself. What was it about this woman that made him so uneasy? He couldn't put his finger on it, but her presence unsettled him in ways he didn't fully understand. Was it her age, her quiet confidence, or was it something deeper, something rooted in assumptions he wasn't proud of? "Hey, you okay?" asked Lisa, another server who noticed Marcus's distracted state. She tilted her head curiously, brushing a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Marcus replied quickly, forcing a smile. But the truth was, he wasn't fine. His mind kept replaying the interaction with Evelyn. The way she had looked at him, calm and composed, as if she could see right through him, it left him feeling exposed, vulnerable, and more than a little ashamed. Back at her table, Evelyn decided on her order: grilled salmon with roasted vegetables. She closed the menu and placed it gently on the edge of the table, signaling politely for assistance. A few minutes passed, but no one came. Servers bustled past her, their trays laden with food and drinks, yet none stopped to take her order. Each time someone walked by without acknowledging her, Evelyn felt a small pang of disappointment, but she refused to let it show. Finally, Marcus returned, though reluctantly. He forced himself to approach her table again, gripping his notepad tightly as if it were a lifeline. "Are you ready to order?" he asked, his voice clipped and professional. "Yes, thank you," Evelyn replied warmly, unfazed by his tone. She recited her choice clearly, meeting his gaze with unwavering kindness. Marcus scribbled it down hastily, avoiding eye contact as much as possible. As he turned to leave, however, Evelyn spoke up. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly, her voice laced with genuine concern. "You seem troubled." The question caught Marcus off guard. For a brief second, he considered brushing it off with a polite response, but something in her tone stopped him. It wasn't accusatory or judgmental. It was simply kind, and that kindness, oddly enough, made him feel even worse. "I'm fine," he muttered, though his flushed cheeks betrayed his discomfort. Without waiting for further conversation, he hurried away, leaving Evelyn alone once more. In the kitchen, Marcus handed off the ticket to the chef, his hands still shaking slightly. He tried to focus on the tasks at hand, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, but his thoughts kept circling back to Evelyn. Why did she have to ask him that? Why did she have to care? Unbeknownst to both of them, someone else in the restaurant was watching closely. From his office near the entrance, Daniel Harmon, the owner of Harmonia, observed the scene unfold with growing unease. A man in his late 30s with warm brown skin and a neatly trimmed beard, Daniel prided himself on running a welcoming establishment. Yet tonight something felt off. He glanced at the security monitors mounted on the wall, which displayed live footage of the dining area. One screen showed Evelyn sitting patiently at her table, while another captured Marcus's nervous movements across the floor. Something about the dynamic between them struck Daniel as unusual and troubling. Curiosity getting the better of him, Daniel stepped out of his office and into the main dining room. He moved casually among the tables, greeting customers and ensuring everything ran smoothly. But his real destination was clear: Evelyn's corner table. When he reached her, he offered a friendly smile. "Good evening, ma'am. I hope you're enjoying your time here tonight." Evelyn looked up, surprised but pleased by the unexpected attention. "Thank you, I am," she said graciously. Your restaurant is lovely. Daniel nodded, though his expression remained thoughtful. If there's anything we can do to make your experience better, please don't hesitate to let me know. His words were polite, but beneath them lay a subtle inquiry, an attempt to gauge whether anything was amiss. Evelyn, ever astute, picked up on it immediately. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before responding. Everything has been fine so far, she said diplomatically, choosing her words carefully. Though service seems a bit slow tonight. The comment hung in the air, light enough not to offend but pointed enough to convey meaning. Daniel's smile faltered slightly, and he gave a small nod of understanding. I'll see what I can do about that, he promised, before excusing himself and heading toward the kitchen. Inside, Daniel found Marcus refilling salt shakers, his movements mechanical and distracted. The young man looked up briefly, startled to see his boss standing there. Sir? We need to talk, Daniel said firmly, gesturing for Marcus to follow him into the office. Once inside, Daniel closed the door and turned to face him. What's going on out there? I noticed some inconsistencies with how certain guests are being treated. Marcus swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew exactly what Daniel was referring to, but admitting it aloud felt impossible. How could he explain something he barely understood himself? As tension filled the air, neither man realized that Evelyn was closer to the situation than either of them imagined. Unbeknownst to Marcus or even Daniel, she had a personal connection to Harmonia that would soon come to light, turning this ordinary evening into an unforgettable lesson in humility and humanity. Daniel's office was small but impeccably organized, with framed photographs lining the walls and a polished oak desk at its center. Behind him, a large window offered a view of the bustling dining room below. Marcus stood awkwardly in front of the desk, his hands clasped tightly together as Daniel studied him with an intense gaze. The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken tension. Marcus, Daniel began, his tone calm but firm. I've always trusted you to represent this restaurant with professionalism and respect. So tell me, what's going on tonight? Marcus hesitated, his mind racing for an explanation that wouldn't incriminate him further. He glanced down at his shoes, avoiding Daniel's piercing eyes. It's nothing, really, he stammered. Just a slow night, I guess. Daniel crossed, his arms over his chest, clearly unconvinced. That's not what I'm hearing, he said evenly. One of our guests mentioned service being unusually delayed, and from what I observed, it seemed like you were struggling with something, or someone, at table 7. The mention of Evelyn's table sent a jolt through Marcus. His throat tightened, and he shifted uncomfortably under Daniel's scrutiny. It's just, she's different, he blurted out before he could stop himself. Different? Daniel repeated, raising an eyebrow. His voice remained steady, but there was an edge to it now, a warning. Different how? Marcus opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, unsure of how to articulate his thoughts without sounding defensive, or worse, prejudiced. He knew deep down that his behavior toward Evelyn had been unfair, but admitting it aloud felt like stepping into dangerous territory. I don't know, he admitted finally, his voice barely above a whisper. She just made me uncomfortable. Daniel sighed deeply, leaning back against his desk. For a moment, he simply stared at Marcus, weighing his next words carefully. Let me ask you something, he said after a pause. Do you think discomfort is a valid reason to treat someone differently? To make them feel unwelcome in a place where they have every right to be? The question hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He wanted to argue, to justify his actions, but the truth was undeniable. No matter how uneasy Evelyn had made him feel, she didn't deserve to be ignored or dismissed. Yet acknowledging that only made him feel smaller, more ashamed. I messed up, Marcus admitted, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I shouldn't have acted that way. I'll fix it, I promise. Daniel nodded slowly, his expression softening slightly. Good. Start by apologizing sincerely, then focus on making sure this doesn't happen again. Not with her and not with anyone else. Relieved to have been given a chance to redeem himself, Marcus hurried out of the office and back into the dining room. As he approached Evelyn's table, his heart pounded in his chest. She looked up as he drew near, her warm smile disarming. "Despite everything, Miss," Marcus began, his voice trembling slightly, "I owe you an apology. My behavior earlier was unacceptable, and I'm truly sorry for making you feel overlooked. It won't happen again." Evelyn regarded him thoughtfully, her expression unreadable. After a long pause, she nodded gently. "Thank you for saying that," she replied softly. "We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." Her words caught Marcus off guard. Instead of anger or resentment, she offered understanding and grace. It left him speechless, humbled in a way he hadn't expected. As Marcus returned to the kitchen, determined to ensure Evelyn's meal arrived promptly, Daniel watched from afar, still troubled by the entire situation. Something about Evelyn lingered in his mind, not just her quiet strength but also the familiarity of her presence. Where had he seen her before? Curiosity tugging at him, Daniel decided to check the reservation list. Scrolling through the names, one entry stopped him cold: Evelyn Harmon. His breath hitched as realization dawned. Evelyn Harmon, the woman sitting patiently in his restaurant, was his mother, his own flesh and blood. The irony struck him like a lightning bolt. All this time, Marcus had unknowingly slighted the very person who had inspired the creation of Harmonia. Daniel's legs felt weak as he processed the revelation. He had named the restaurant after her maiden name as a tribute to her resilience and love for family traditions. Yet here she was, treated poorly by someone working under his roof. The weight of the irony pressed heavily on his chest. Taking a deep breath, Daniel composed himself and walked back out into the dining room. This time he headed straight for Evelyn's table, his steps deliberate and purposeful. When he reached her, he knelt beside her chair, his eyes filled with emotion. "Mom," he said softly, his voice thick with remorse. "I had no idea you were coming tonight." Evelyn turned to him, her lips curving into a knowing smile. "And yet here I am," she replied gently. "Sometimes life has a way of teaching us lessons when we least expect them." Daniel nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. In that moment, he realized this evening wasn't just about correcting Marcus's mistake. It was about confronting his own blind spots and ensuring that Harmonia lived up to the values it claimed to represent. Evelyn's words hung in the air, soft yet profound, as Daniel knelt beside her chair. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the restaurant faded into the background, leaving only the quiet bond between mother and son, a bond that had always been rooted in love, respect, and shared values. Daniel finally found his voice, though it wavered with emotion. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, his gaze fixed on hers. "If I'd known you were coming tonight, I would have made sure everything was perfect for you." Evelyn placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her touch steady and reassuring. "It's all right, Daniel," she replied warmly. "Sometimes perfection isn't about flawless service or grand gestures. It's about learning and growing from the moments that challenge us." Her words struck a chord deep within him. As the owner of Harmonia, Daniel had always prided himself on creating an inclusive environment where everyone felt welcome. But seeing his own mother treated unfairly by someone under his employ forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth. No matter how noble his intentions, blind spots existed, and they could hurt the people closest to him. "I should have been more attentive," Daniel admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I let this happen right under my nose." Evelyn shook her head slightly, her expression calm but firm. "This isn't just about you, Daniel. It's about all of us. How we see others, how we treat them, and whether we truly live up to the ideals we claim to believe in." Her wisdom left Daniel speechless. He had spent years building Harmonia as a tribute to her strength and resilience, naming it after her maiden name to honor her legacy. Yet tonight, that same legacy had been tested, not because of anything Evelyn did, but because of the assumptions and biases carried by those around her. As Daniel rose to his feet, he glanced toward the kitchen, where Marcus was busy preparing Evelyn's meal. The young waiter moved with purpose now, clearly determined to make amends. Daniel couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for him. After all, hadn't he too been guilty of making snap judgments at some point in his life? Weren't they all works in progress? "Let me take care of your dinner personally," Daniel offered, pulling out a chair to sit beside Evelyn. "I want to make sure everything is exactly how you like it." Evelyn chuckled softly, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "You don't have to go to such lengths, dear. I came here simply to enjoy a nice meal, not to turn this into a spectacle." But Daniel insisted, unable to shake the weight of what had transpired. This wasn't just any evening. It was a turning point, a chance to set things right not only for Evelyn, but also for everyone who walked through the doors of Harmonia. If he couldn't ensure fairness and kindness within his own establishment, how could he expect others to do the same? While Daniel accompanied Evelyn to oversee her meal, Marcus worked tirelessly in the kitchen, double-checking every detail. He plated the grilled salmon with extra care, garnishing it with fresh herbs and a drizzle of lemon butter sauce. When the dish was ready, he carried it out himself, his hands trembling slightly as he approached Evelyn's table. "Ma'am," Marcus said, setting the plate down gently before her. "Your meal. Please let me know if there's anything else I can do for you." Evelyn looked up at him, her smile warm and forgiving. "Thank you, Marcus," she said kindly. "It looks wonderful." For the first time that evening, Marcus felt a flicker of relief. Her graciousness disarmed him, reminding him that second chances weren't just given. They were earned through humility and effort. Watching from a distance, Daniel observed the exchange with a mixture of pride and reflection. His mother's ability to forgive so effortlessly inspired him, reinforcing the lessons he hoped to instill in his staff and in himself. Later, as Evelyn took her first bite of the salmon, she closed her eyes briefly, savoring the flavors. "Delicious," she murmured, opening her eyes to meet Daniel's gaze. "Just like old times." Her comment stirred memories in Daniel, memories of family dinners, laughter-filled kitchens, and the stories Evelyn used to tell about overcoming adversity with grace. Those stories had shaped him, teaching him the importance of resilience, empathy, and integrity. Yet tonight, Evelyn wasn't just sharing a meal. She was imparting a lesson, one that Daniel knew he needed to carry forward. The events of the evening had revealed cracks in the foundation of Harmonia, cracks that could only be repaired through action, accountability, and a renewed commitment to inclusivity. As Evelyn continued to eat, Daniel excused himself momentarily, stepping aside to gather his thoughts. He realized that the changes needed went beyond addressing Marcus's behavior. They required a deeper examination of the culture he had built within Harmonia. It was time to lead not just by example, but by fostering an environment where mistakes were opportunities for growth, and where everyone felt seen, heard, and valued. Little did Daniel know, Evelyn had one final surprise planned for the evening. A gesture that would leave an indelible mark on everyone involved, including Marcus. And when it unfolded, the ripple effects would extend far beyond the walls of the restaurant. As Evelyn savored her meal, the atmosphere in Harmonia began to shift subtly. The tension that had lingered earlier seemed to dissolve, replaced by a quiet sense of renewal. Daniel returned to his mother's side, pulling up a chair once more. He watched her with admiration, noting how effortlessly she commanded respect without saying a word. Her presence was a reminder of everything he aspired to embody: strength, compassion, and grace. "Mom," Daniel said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. "You didn't come here tonight just for dinner, did you?" Evelyn paused mid-bite, lowering her fork onto the plate. She turned to face him, her expression thoughtful but unreadable. "What makes you say that?" she asked, her voice laced with gentle curiosity. Daniel hesitated, searching for the right words. "I know you, Mom. You always have a reason, a purpose for the things you do. Coming here tonight, especially unannounced, it feels like there's more to it." Evelyn smiled faintly, her eyes twinkling with a mix of mischief and wisdom. Perhaps, she admitted, leaning back in her chair. But before I share my thoughts, I want to hear yours. What lesson do you think this evening holds? For Marcus? For your staff? And even for yourself? The question caught Daniel off guard. He had spent the past hour reflecting on the events of the night, yet putting his realizations into words felt daunting. After a moment, he spoke carefully, choosing each phrase with deliberation. I think it's about humility, he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, about recognizing our blind spots and owning up to them. It's easy to talk about inclusivity or fairness when everything is going smoothly. But when challenges arise, when we're forced to confront uncomfortable truths, that's when our values are truly tested. Evelyn nodded approvingly, encouraging him to continue. For Marcus, Daniel added, glancing toward the kitchen where the young waiter was clearing tables. This was a wake-up call. He made a mistake, yes, but he also showed courage by apologizing and trying to make amends. That takes strength, and it's something I need to acknowledge. And for you? Evelyn prompted gently, her gaze unwavering. For me? Daniel trailed off, his voice faltering slightly. For me, this was a reminder that leadership isn't just about setting standards, it's about living them. If I expect my team to treat every guest with dignity and respect, then I have to model that behavior myself. I can't afford to be complacent, not when people's experiences depend on it. Evelyn reached across the table, placing her hand over his. You've always been a good son, Daniel, she said warmly. And you've built something beautiful here. But sometimes even the strongest foundations need reinforcement. That's why I came tonight, to remind you of the importance of staying grounded, no matter how high you climb. Her words resonated deeply with Daniel, filling him with both gratitude and resolve. Yet Evelyn wasn't finished. She leaned forward slightly, her tone shifting to one of quiet determination. There's one more thing I'd like to do while I'm here, she announced, her smile widening ever so slightly. A gesture, not just for you, but for everyone who works in this restaurant. Daniel frowned, intrigued. What kind of gesture? Instead of answering directly, Evelyn signaled for the manager on duty and requested that all staff members gather near the entrance of the dining room. Within minutes, servers, bartenders, chefs, and dishwashers assembled, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Evelyn stood slowly, her posture regal despite her age, and addressed the group. Thank you all for taking a moment to join me, she began, her voice carrying a warmth that put everyone at ease. Tonight has been an eye-opening experience, not just for me, but for many of us. Mistakes were made, yes, but they were also acknowledged and corrected. That takes courage, and I commend each of you for being open to growth. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. To show my appreciation for your hard work, and to encourage continued kindness, I've decided to leave a gift for all of you. With that, she gestured to Daniel, who handed her a small envelope containing a generous tip meant for the entire staff. The room fell silent as Evelyn distributed the envelope, her smile radiating pride and encouragement. For many, the gesture was unexpected, but its impact was undeniable. Marcus, standing near the back of the group, felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. This woman, whom he had wronged so profoundly, was choosing not only to forgive him, but to reward him alongside his colleagues. When the gathering dispersed, Evelyn returned to her seat, visibly content. Daniel looked at her in awe, shaking his head slightly. You never cease to amaze me, Mom, he murmured. How do you always find a way to turn difficult moments into lessons of love and generosity? Evelyn chuckled softly, patting his hand affectionately. Because life is too short to hold grudges, or to waste opportunities to lift others up. As the evening drew to a close, the ripple effects of Evelyn's actions became clear. Staff members whispered among themselves, inspired by her grace and generosity. Meanwhile, Daniel vowed to implement new training programs focused on empathy and cultural sensitivity, ensuring that Harmonia remained a place where everyone felt welcome. But Evelyn's visit wasn't over yet. As she prepared to leave, she hinted at one final revelation, one that would tie the evening together in ways no one could anticipate. As Evelyn prepared to leave Harmonia, she paused near the entrance, her hand resting lightly on the polished wooden railing. Daniel stood beside her, holding open the door as a cool autumn breeze swept through the restaurant. The evening had been transformative, for Marcus, for the staff, and especially for Daniel himself. But Evelyn's demeanor suggested there was still more to come. "Before I go," Evelyn said, turning to face her son, "there's something I need to share with you. Something that might change how you see this place, and your role in it." Daniel frowned, his curiosity piqued. "What is it, Mom?" he asked, his voice tinged with both anticipation and apprehension. Evelyn smiled softly, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of wisdom and resilience. She reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph, its edges slightly worn from years of handling. Handing it to Daniel, she waited silently as he studied the image. The photo showed a much younger Evelyn standing proudly outside a small diner, its sign reading Harmonia Diner in bold letters. Beside her stood a man who looked strikingly familiar. It was Daniel's father, wearing a chef's apron and grinning widely. The resemblance between him and Daniel was uncanny, down to the same warm smile and confident posture. "This was our first restaurant," Evelyn explained, her voice filled with nostalgia. "Your father and I opened it together when we were just starting out. It wasn't fancy or glamorous, but it was ours, a place where everyone felt welcome no matter their background or circumstances." Daniel stared at the photograph, his heart swelling with emotion. He had heard stories about the diner growing up, but seeing it captured so vividly brought those memories to life in a way words never could. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted you to build Harmonia on your own terms," Evelyn replied gently. "But tonight reminded me of why we started that little diner in the first place, to create a space where people could come together, share meals, and feel valued. That's the legacy I hope you'll carry forward." Her words struck a deep chord within Daniel. All these years he had thought of Harmonia as a tribute to Evelyn's maiden name, a symbol of elegance and sophistication. But now he realized it represented something far greater, a continuation of the values his parents had instilled in him from childhood. Values of inclusivity, kindness, and community. Evelyn placed a gentle hand on his arm, her gaze steady and reassuring. "You've done well, Daniel. This restaurant is beautiful and you've worked tirelessly to make it successful. But don't lose sight of what truly matters, the people. They're the heart of any establishment, not the menus or the decor." Daniel nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose wash over him. "I won't forget, Mom. I promise." As they stepped outside, the crisp night air enveloped them, carrying with it the faint scent of fallen leaves. Evelyn glanced back at the restaurant one last time, her expression thoughtful. "There's one more thing," she said, pausing to meet Daniel's eyes. "I'd like to host a special event here next month, an evening dedicated to honoring the unsung heroes of our communities. Servers, cooks, janitors, teachers, nurses, the people who keep things running behind the scenes." Daniel blinked, in surprise, touched by the idea. "That sounds incredible, Mom. But are you sure you want to take that on?" Evelyn chuckled, her tone playful yet firm. "Of course I'm sure. And you'll help me organize it, won't you?" "Absolutely," Daniel replied without hesitation. "It would be an honor." With that, Evelyn gave him a final hug, her embrace filled with love and pride. As she walked away, Daniel watched her disappear into the night, the weight of her lessons settling warmly in his chest. He knew this evening would stay with him forever, not just because of what had happened, but because of the opportunities it presented to grow and evolve. Back inside the restaurant, Marcus approached Daniel hesitantly, his hands clasped tightly, together. "Sir," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Daniel turned to face him, his expression softening. Of course, Marcus, what's on your mind? Marcus took a deep breath, gathering his courage. I just wanted to thank you and your mom for everything tonight. I know I messed up, but she taught me something important. About humility, forgiveness, and doing better. Daniel nodded, placing a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. We all have room to improve, Marcus. The key is learning from our mistakes and using them to become better versions of ourselves. As the two men stood there, united by shared understanding, the energy in Harmonia felt lighter somehow, as if the events of the evening had cleansed the air, leaving behind a fresh start for everyone involved. Yet even as Daniel returned to his duties, he couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn's visit marked the beginning of something bigger. Something that would redefine not only the restaurant, but also the lives of everyone connected to it. The weeks following Evelyn's visit passed quickly, but the impact of that unforgettable evening lingered like a warm glow within Harmonia. Daniel threw himself into planning the special event his mother had proposed, an evening to honor unsung heroes from all walks of life. He worked tirelessly alongside Marcus and the rest of the staff, ensuring every detail reflected the values Evelyn had so eloquently reminded them of: inclusivity, gratitude, and community. Posters went up around town advertising the event, inviting local teachers, nurses, sanitation workers, and other everyday heroes to enjoy a free meal at Harmonia. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of people RSVP'd, eager to be celebrated in a way they rarely were. For Daniel, organizing this night felt like more than just hosting an event. It was a chance to redefine what Harmonia stood for. On the evening of the gathering, the restaurant buzzed with energy unlike any other night. Tables were adorned with simple yet elegant centerpieces, bundles of wildflowers tied with ribbon, and soft music played in the background. As guests began arriving, their faces lit up with surprise and appreciation. Many of them weren't used to being treated as VIPs, but tonight, they were the stars of the show. Evelyn arrived fashionably late, dressed in her signature navy blue coat and velvet scarf. When she stepped through the doors, the entire room seemed to pause briefly, as if acknowledging her quiet presence. Daniel greeted her warmly, his eyes shining with pride. You did it, Mom, he said softly. This is all because of you. Evelyn shook her head, smiling gently. No, Daniel, this is because of you, and everyone here who believes in making the world a little kinder. As the evening unfolded, stories poured forth from the guests. A teacher shared how she stayed late every night to tutor struggling students. A janitor spoke about finding joy in keeping spaces clean and safe. A nurse recounted long shifts spent comforting patients and their families. Each story was met with applause and heartfelt thanks, creating a tapestry of shared humanity that filled the room with warmth. Marcus, too, found himself deeply moved by the event. Assigned to serve one of the tables, he listened intently as a young single mother described working 2 jobs to provide for her children. Her resilience struck a chord in him, reminding him of Evelyn's grace and strength. At the end of the meal, he approached her tentatively. Thank you for sharing your story, he said sincerely. It means a lot to me, and I think to everyone here. The woman looked up at him, surprised but touched. Thank you for listening, she replied with a warm smile. Sometimes that's all we need, to know someone cares. Later, during a brief lull in the festivities, Evelyn took the stage, a rare move for someone so reserved. Holding a microphone, she addressed the crowd, her voice steady and full of emotion. Tonight isn't just about celebrating you, she began, her gaze sweeping across the room. It's about recognizing the power of kindness, the ripple effect it creates when we choose to see each other not as strangers, but as equals. Her words resonated deeply, drawing nods and murmurs of agreement from the audience. When she finished speaking, the room erupted into applause, the sound echoing like waves against the walls of the restaurant. As the night drew to a close, Daniel stood by the entrance, shaking hands and bidding farewell to departing guests. Marcus joined him, his expression thoughtful. I never realized how much difference a single act of kindness could make, he admitted. not just for others, but for ourselves too. Daniel nodded, clapping him on the back. That's the beauty of it, Marcus. Kindness has a way of coming back to us, sometimes when we least expect it. When the last guest left, Daniel turned off the lights and locked the door behind him. Standing outside under the starlit sky, he glanced at the plaque near the entrance. Harmonia. A place for everyone. For the first time, he truly understood what those words meant, not just as a slogan, but as a promise. Inside the quiet restaurant, the echoes of laughter and gratitude lingered, proof that change had taken root. And somewhere in the distance, Evelyn smiled, knowing her legacy would continue to inspire long after she was gone. This final part wraps up the story with a sense of hope and renewal, leaving readers with a powerful message about the transformative power of kindness and empathy.